I'm Shanna Martin, host of the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Is this an episode of WandaVision or the High Tech Podcast? Because I think we are going out of frame. This is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we look a bit different. If you're listening to just the audio, you're like, this is the same thing. And again, we state you should look at us in real life. We have video now. But Will and I are here. It's the High Tech Podcast, and we're playing around with a new tool because that's what we do.
That's what we do.
In the High Tech Podcast.
Jinx.
Yeah. We before we get too far into the episode and we do our whole thing, those of you who have been listening for a while might know we've talked about we use Zencaster. We decided to play around with a new tool. We decided to join those using Riverside.
We're taking a swim down the river.
Yeah. We're doing a little stuff. Doing a little thing, you know? This should be interesting.
Forgive us. We're literally testing as we go. We did a little testing before we hit play, or record, but we're having fun.
Whatever we did. The real important part is that this means we get fun things. Yeah.
I line up a corny joke or say something that's really funny, and we go and we wait for a very basic. Oh, bummer. There it is.
We're not there yet. We're still figuring that part out. We have sound effects now. This is fun. Yeah, I thought you were going to tell a joke. That's why I thought like a joke was coming, and then like you didn't do it.
But the perfect awkward silence.
Yeah. It was good. You know,
perfectly awful.
Yeah.
Hey folks, another episode, another day of the High Tech Podcast. This is episode 90. What? I don't even know. 96.
6. I thought you were about to say 91. I was like, no, we've lived that. That's been done.
Several times before.
It's already happened. Yeah.
Will and Josh, the Tappet brothers. If you're not familiar with that reference, go back to Car Talk that used to be on, I think it was NPR.
I'm not even familiar with that. When you said that, I was like, what? What
Click
was
and
that?
Clack, the Tappet brothers.
The Tappet brothers.
Car Talk
if I had a if I had a sad sound effect, I would have played it then. Yeah, like I don't have that currently. Anyway.
We are kind of having a good time here with an episode after the ungrading series. We finally have finished that. It's behind us.
It's done.
Wow.
You now all know how to
5
do ungrading.
episodes.
You can implement it immediately.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, give it a shot. Probably all of you are doing it in all your courses now.
Please do.
That's what I like to believe. I like to believe when we do a series, people just immediately start doing it because we're that cool. I don't think that's actually happening, but like that would be cool if it was, you know?
Audience, listener, if you're not watching, I shook my head yes, and very quickly shook my head no, because I doubt that's what's happening. This week, we want to actually dig into a game. Okay, not literally a game, but literally a game. Josh and I were, was it New Year's? We had a bunch of folks together.
It was New Year's. Somebody had gotten, I got my wife game called Hot Takes. It advertised itself as like a fun hot take game, which it was, but like it had
duds.
Yeah, it had duds, and it also had like, it wasn't just like, you know, cheese is better than sauerkraut. I don't know. That's not a debate anybody is having, but like waffles are better than pancakes. Okay, like that's the
hot
type
take.
That's the hot take that I imagined happening. Instead, it was like, is capital punishment okay? Like that was like serious political views. It tested our ability to have conversations.
It was a very diverse crowd of people having a great time, New Year's Eve, and these were the things coming up. And we're like, maybe we want more of those sauerkraut questions that Josh was talking about.
That's just my vibe. That was what I was feeling, you know? But
so the question that came up, I mean, I'm sneaking and sneaking and sneaking. Like literally my sneak level is 98 by now. up
Nice
to
reference.
the topic of the episode. Thank you. Until I took an arrow to the knee. But
Ooh, nailed
the
it.
question that we got that night was something like, I don't know if I have it in quotes here, so I don't know if we literally wrote it down that night or not, but the question came up, and this is what we wrote down.
Yeah.
Will young people today have less interpersonal communication skills because of social media?
Ooh, that was
And-
actually the question. You wrote that down verbatim.
I must have.
That was
I must
solid.
have, yeah.
That was solid work. You know what? You
Forethought.
You deserve some claps. There you go.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow, thank you.
This is gonna be
Thank
the
you.
most obnoxious episode for those listening. They're like, oh no. It's like right now, Will and I are like the first person who discovered PowerPoint like word art. Like or like animation.
That's good.
That's what it is. Like
That's
we're like
good.
the prof that just
Yep.
discovered animations. So I'm
Oh, yeah.
sorry. I'm sure this will level out in a couple episodes. But for now, just ride the wave. Ride the wave with
Okay.
us and it'll be fine.
But very quick tangent. In fact, this is so quick of a tangent that I promise you won't have to put this in the show notes, but you might have to. I'm so sorry. Have you used Google Slides annotation features recently? Like
No.
the animation features in Google Slides is it's really powerful. You can time it, you can click it. I literally the other day was thinking through to myself as I was working on a video for work. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do an animation for the video. And I'm like, oh, all right, I haven't used After Effects in years. I'm gonna have to like take an hour or two to just relearn Adobe After Effects.
Yeah.
Instead of using Adobe After Effects, I stumbled upon the fact that I could do an animation in Slides. I just screen recorded it and used that animation to create what I wanted to in Google Slides. I did like a revealing cascading effect on a pyramid, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and because it was all these different like images, I was able to like separate it up and just go click, 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 and it went boop, 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 and it looked really professional, really clean. Google Slides, baby. You don't even need Adobe After Effects anymore.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Not a sponsor
I'm
either.
finding
of
it
those.
funnier because there's at least 6 tools we've recommended between season 2 and 3 that could have done all of that for you. And I think it's hilarious that you didn't use any of them. Like we've talked about them on the podcast, and you're like, man, Google Slides. Like this, like I'm pretty sure Canva you could have done that. I'm pretty sure Camtasia you could have done that. Like. I'm
The
just
pyramid and the thing was already in Google Slides. I was like taking this out of Google Slides to put it into my video, to put it into After Effects.
It's okay. It's defensible. It's good.
Sorry.
Anyway,
My bad.
this
That
episode
tangent
literally
aside.
has nothing to do with Google Slides. That's not even our app for today. So this question came up in our hot takes, and the reason Will and I wanted to talk about this because like any people with strong opinions who run a podcast, it can become a platform. For us to say things that we felt strongly about during the game that we like. I think you and I were on the same page. Okay, like this was one of those cards that dropped down. If I remember correctly, you and I were kind of like the immediate answer. So like people, okay, context for the
Sure.
game,
Right.
So like you put down the thing, the hot take, right? Okay,
I'll read it again. Let me read it again.
read it
Will
again, read it again.
young
Imagine-
people
imagine you're in Will's dining room. Okay.
around my table,
Around its table,
10 people.
it's a white table. There's some wood around. Okay, just imagine
blue linen.
blue linen.
The Christmas tree is still up
There's a Christmas tree. Okay,
behind me.
and you're celebrating another year going away. Okay, so get that picture all in your head. Okay, this
question
the
comes
environment
up.
You're a part of.
Will young people today have less interpersonal communication skills because of social media? And the group has to individually, each person, respond whether they think they agree or disagree with that.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the language it uses?
They put down a card, and on one side of the card it says yes, on the other card of the side it says no. And then basically when you put those cards down, the yes side, like the way the game's supposed to work is everybody's supposed to group up based on their opinion, and then they have to come up with kind of like an argument. And argue against each other and try to convince people to come over. We were not into moving around. It was not an environment for that. We had more people than needed. So anyway, this is all way more context than you really need, but I want you to live the moment with us. Okay? So they put that card down, okay? And we've been kind of split about most topics. And then everybody puts their cards down, and everybody's like immediately yes. And Will and I are like, no. We're like the only two.
Probably
Like
not.
we're kind of, yeah, like we're like, we're like kind of back and forth about it, you know. In normal Will and I fashion, we took like the annoying middle ground perspective where like we kind of think both of you on the opposite sides are wrong. But we somehow have figured this all out. Yeah, that's the environment. And so what spawned this question. So we wanted to discuss it with you guys. And honestly, it's a podcast, so you won't be able to really tell us what you think until afterwards. But we're going to pretend like you're all on our side. And we're going to try to convince you of why.
That's why we have the podcast, so that we believe the audience agrees with us, and that we just reinforce our own personal bias.
So before we get too far into this conversation, I want to take a second to just... let's make sure we understand what it means by interpersonal, okay? The reason I want to bring this up is because
this was fight.
In our game, this was a debate. Nobody really, I feel like everybody was kind of all over the place. So Oxford Dictionary defines it as relating to relationships or communication between people. It gives a sentence example. You will need good interpersonal skills, you know? Like that's so everybody's probably listening right now going, yes, we know that, guys. We understand that, but there was some debate. Okay, so I think like this. It was not so cut and dry.
It
was not so cut and dry. Okay, but I mean, like, really, interpersonal skills is like relational skills, right? And this is nothing new. I think this is also why Will and I wanted to talk about this, because we hear this all the time. Like, the world is worse at interacting with each other because of social media. Like I think that's a general kind of statement we hear mentioned quite a lot. So we wanted to think through our perspectives here as two people who've worked with younger students, worked with college age people. I think we have some hot takes on this, so to speak.
Well, and I want to set this up with just a little bit of like interpersonal skills, young people today, all this crap.
Yeah.
A little bit of context, right? We have now had the iPhone since the early 2000s, waiting for my Google to spin through. It's almost there.
This is where it's clear Will and I didn't do pre-research.
No, I mean, this is just like coming up to me, you know, pretty fresh here. Okay, 2002? Is it the first time? As of the iPhone accounts for, 22. It was released on 2007. 2007, okay.
Yeah, 2007.
So
that took my Google 5 seconds to find. Why was that?
16 years later. Hey, leave me alone. All right. I don't
I
use Google. I use Start Page.
I spelled release wrong, and it still found.
Well done. So the iPhone, let's say 16 years it's been around.
Yeah.
And it's taken the world by. I mean, there is not a person you don't see with an iPhone or smartphone in their hands. I mean, it's just like they're everywhere. I see them everywhere. But at the time in my life where people were saying this similar statement, will young people today have less interpersonal communication skills because of was AOL Instant Messenger or Zanga, or like just generally the internet? Like, are the kids spending so much time on video games that they're not going to have the interpersonal communication skills? AOL Instant Messenger came out in 1997. Within 10 years, the iPhone was out, 2007. And so for that 10-year period of time, and like my teens experience, this was always aiming at like texting, just straight texting, and AOL and all this kind of stuff. Like, is digital communication going to kill our ability to have interpersonal communication skills? Now, I can't say that I'm the poster child for communication, but Josh and I are having a pretty good conversation now. We've got about 94 plus episodes behind us of this podcast. Yeah. We're doing okay. Well, this is episode 96. 94 plus. But
it's literally 95.
There's the 5 interview episodes.
100 episodes. Either way, I was looking for accuracy. I thought I got you. You're good.
Nope. I got you. I'm just bringing this up to say, like, this is on this hot takes card today, and 10 years ago, this hot takes card would have been AIM, would have been whatever. And we just kind of keep coming back to this one of like, is the new thing of the age gonna kill kids' ability to do anything, right? And I'm like, okay, first, it's not going to kill kids, so calm down, people. Then it's not going to kill their ability to do anything. We're resilient. We as a humanity are able to be more than the things in just our environment, right? Like, humans have always been dealing with technological improvements, changes in the world. This time it happens to be social media. This question's even beyond the iPhone. This one's saying social media because all of our iPhones, we use them to get to social. I just think it's like hubris. I think it's crazy to think that one thing, this new thing, is what's going to be the thing that finally kills our ability to like be decent human beings and work with each other.
Yeah, no, and
Hello?
that's where, and I have like a middle ground perspective to this, because I think part of the reason I remember giving a no, but like I was back and forth about how I wanted to answer it, because I've talked about this before in the podcast. I do believe that technology, digital tools, but not even just digital tools, tech in general. We've talked about this before in the podcast. The way I define technology, when we talk about it in our culture today, we often, when we say technology, we mean digital tools. But technology is more than just digital tools. We've always had technology from the day of like the pickaxe. I mean, before that, but that's the thing that came to my mind. Like fire is technically
the original tablet.
Yeah, the original tablet, the clay tablet. And so I do believe, and actually there's a quote, not to toot my own horn, I just tweeted it this week. I did another tweet other than the podcast, bro. So I was reading an article by a guy that, it probably didn't rise to your thread. It wasn't like, oh, look, Josh with his like whole 80 people that follow him got super excited about something. So I was reading an article by a guy called David Smith.
Yep.
Who I'm sure you're familiar with. He wrote an article, I don't remember when, it was recently. It was on Grammarly, AI editors, and ChatGPT, because, we can't not talk about this.
So it's been since November 2022.
Yeah, it's been since November 2022. He didn't mention ChatGPT 4, though, so we know it's at least not within the last 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, now he was focusing, I want to just give context. The article was focusing on, like, writing and the way it impacts, but he said something at the end of this article that I thought was really helpful. Basically said, our digital tools provide us with specific affordances, right? Things that we gain from those digital tools. But those things that we gain, those affordances, they nudge us towards specific habits of doing things. And those habits influence the way I'm kind of reading it quote for quote, but for the most part, it says, the way we move through the world and the persona that we shape for ourselves. Okay. Right? So like his context is, it's not just one tool, it's not just one thing, it's that these things give us things, we lose things with technology, and that does shape us in certain ways. And so I will acknowledge that I do think there is some credence to like tools like social media and things shaping our interactions and the way we do things. But do I think it's for sure that because this thing exists, that everybody's interpersonal skills are just destroyed? Like, is that the main cause of why kids' interpersonal skills are struggling? Because we hear this a lot from educators, both in higher ed and K-12, that they feel like kids' social skills, their ability to interact, do group work is decreasing over time. Like they think they're seeing a clear difference. And I think there's probably some credence to that, but do I think social media is the sole thing to blame? No. Probably not. No. Do I think, because like a good example will be like, Will, you and I use social media. You use social media more than I do. And you are better socially than I am. Let's just be honest. So like, to a certain extent, I can be meaner. Yeah, it's, hey, high-tech podcast.
I don't know. Some of those things, like, I just don't know if that's like, because here's the philosophical or maybe even like ontological element of this. Like, what is sociality? What is socialness? I don't know, right? Like, you just tied it quickly to like, I'm nicer sometimes or whatever you said. I'm like, I don't know if that's the thing that makes, like, because I could be mean to somebody you could be nice to, and vice versa, right? But like,
I'm oversimplifying it in our situation.
Well, no, I think that this is useful because I think like some folks might look at interpersonal communication skills as like the ability to walk up to a bank teller and make a withdrawal. well, yeah, I can go to a bank teller, be polite, make a withdrawal, and get money in, and go up to somebody at a restaurant and order my dinner, right? Meanwhile, I hate, literally get like almost probably anxious when I look at my phone and I see a phone call come up. Like, I don't want to talk to somebody on the phone. and I think that's one of these things, like, people might say, you know, I'm good at those things, ordering and socials and this and that, but like, I don't want to take a phone call. Is that these examples of these interpersonal communication skills, or is it just very well the ability to have a conversation? Is it the I guess the person's ability to stand up, put themselves out there, give it a try, be willing to hear back, like, but almost that's almost more like conversational skills in the sense of like debates and willingness to engage somebody with a different opinion. So I don't know. I think it's all in there. I think all of this is a little bit of interpersonal communication skills. And I think that, like, I haven't met many people who can't do this.
Yeah,
there are people who can't, and some of them are neurodivergent and they just have less abilities to engage socially. Some of them are just less interested in social people and engaging. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if it's like some sickness or disease of social media that's killing us that way.
Yeah, and I think if we're being honest, the thing I think you and I took issue with, especially, that everybody kind of like rolled their eyes that we were being overly semantic, but I don't care. It was what said it. It was the assumption that because social media existed, their skills will automatically be less in this area than people who have come before them in this space. And I disagree. I think I made a joke. I was like, I've met plenty of people older than me who are bad at like in social environments, and it wasn't because of Facebook.
But it doesn't make it any better.
Yeah, so it doesn't make it better.
It takes those same people and puts them in a bigger audience, bigger forum, and now it's great.
I think the point is that, and yes, you and I have a tendency to like technology. We like social media to a certain extent. Although I say that, and I like barely do. I occasionally tweet, and I like open Facebook and Instagram. But like, there's a point though that I think where I keep trying to hammer this home when we talked about several episodes ago where we talked about philosophy of technology earlier on in season 3. Like, I went to this as well. There's this reaction to technology to assume that it is the cause of the problem. And I think even back to the quote from like Smith, the concept is all technology, no matter what it is, gives us something different. It can empower us to do something differently. It can give us a skill to do things like you brought up with social media. It gives us the ability to connect to people across the world that we didn't have the ability to connect with before. In different ways. And that should be valued. And that's an incredible ability to do that. Now, it can be abused, it can be misused, but the reality is that's a gain that we get through there. I don't know why this is what comes to mind when I think of it, but there's somebody who talks about this in like technology amputating things as well. Giving and amputating. I can't remember the name. One of my coworkers would, if he would listen to this, he probably won't, but if he would, he would know what I'm talking about, because we were just talking about this when we were talking about ChatGPT. It's this idea that also technology takes something away. So like social media, I do think if you aren't careful, either with your younger kids, or if you're listening to this and you're a college student or whatever you're doing, and all your interactions are only through social media, I do think interpersonal skills struggle a little bit. But that's because it's different. Like, I think your social media interpersonal skills probably are better than some others, depending on how you interact on social media. But it's not necessarily that like their other skills are just worse because of that. I think it depends on how we interact, how we use it, and how we leverage it.
I think the point you're getting there or revealing there is right. Like, social media is something that they're doing frequently. They're practicing it. They're practicing the way in which they're doing those communication skills. And I was thinking about this, like, even as you're saying, like, wow, you know, on Twitter with a character limit, and Facebook used to have a character limit, right? They did away with it way earlier, way long ago. But like, in a short form social media context, there's even like less space to be polite. You're not going to say things like please, thank you, dear sir. I mean, how often do you get the text message from someone, you know, dear Josh, you know, like,
Yeah, well, that's usually a spam person.
My mom does it. That's about it.
Yeah.
Like that's
or the to whomever it concerns.
Right. Those things we don't say in English anyways. Just like language, spoken language, person to person. But like the space for social media is to be direct, is to say something exactly. And when we are taught, I think, in communication with persons, person to person, by our parents, by our family, we pick up the etiquette cues we need to have good interpersonal skills that I think harken back to what you said earlier, like being nice to each other. Like, there are definitely people who, if their sole training in communication is social media, they are not regularly or consistently communicating with other humans in a person-to-person context, they are not going to know the etiquette or the rhythms, the habits of natural speech and natural communication with another person. They might be direct and pithy like their social media. And like, just saying that is like, holy smokes, that makes sense of some of the people I've met who are more inclined towards social media or text-based communication. And then you get them in a room with real humans. It's like, do you know how to hold a conversation? Like, what's going on here?
But
they
again,
just need practice.
It's anything in too much of anything can have negative impacts and effects.
Ask my dentist about sugar. Like, gosh,
Well,
I think
that's
it's great.
That's a lie. That's clearly a wives' tale. I just think the point is we often like to blame technology for things, and all technology does is provides us another thing that we can either use well or abuse, and when we abuse it, it's going to have negative impacts. And so I think the reason we reacted the way that we do to this question, and the reason I have problems with this question, is because it's often, and maybe it's my millennialness to this, because I feel like we dealt with this all the time from older generation. It's usually said in this way of like, those darn kids and their social media, like, look at all the skills they're losing. Meanwhile, that person also saying it can't refresh a screen on a computer.
Press F5, Control R.
So anyway, I just think it's not. I think in moderation, and when we understand how a technology like social media can influence us, and we use it well, that doesn't necessarily mean people are going to have bad interpersonal skills because this exists. It's not a direct correlation in my mind. It's a part of the picture, but it's more complicated than that. It's social media. It's like you talk about this. It's honestly, I'd point more towards iPhones and smartphones to some of the impact technologically that we're seeing on society, because it's there. But I also don't even think that by itself is the problem. Like apps and the way people design their apps in, quite frankly, horrible ways that drag people in. That's also part of the problem. People abusing user experience principles to addict people to their programs. I'm getting on my soapbox. Like the phone did was provide a place for people to do that. But people have been abusing and pulling people in, and addiction has existed way before the iPhone and social media did. The problem is human nature, not the actual technology itself.
And the people manipulating or taking advantage of human nature.
Yes.
Like, I saw somebody, to your point here, I saw somebody last week on LinkedIn, a working adult. Now, they're probably a millennial. They might be in the late 30s, early 40s, so they could be an elder millennial or whatever that was, Gen Y.
I'd like to believe that they're the generation under us. It's always their fault, clearly.
Well, no. This guy was saying he was ready to, or he was like, hey, don't reach out to me. I'm going on a cleanse. And like 9 out of 10 times I've ever heard cleanse in my life, it's usually involves a lot of carrot juice and celery. Like, I've heard of cleanses before. He said, I am going on a dopamine cleanse. I will be off social media for 30 days. And when he said that, and like apps, he was like, I'm like, here's my phone number, call me. And he didn't put his phone number on the internet, but when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is someone who's aware of what happens with some of the dopamine cycles with apps and things like that, but is so aware of it and so concerned for it that they're willing to take a whole month off from certain technologies, from social media, to protect themselves from what they consider to be the dopamine rush or dopamine addiction of social media and stuff like that. I will be honest with you. I made a post a couple weeks back on LinkedIn that went semi-viral. Now, viral to me is like hundreds of thousands, millions. That to me anymore is viral. I'm from the YouTube days where YouTube was made, and viral was like 100 people looked at my thing. Now, I'm just putting that in context to say, like, it's up to 30,000 impressions a few weeks later. I know. Oh, no. No, okay. All right. Yep. I was wondering why you got quiet. You started looking off screen.
I was trying to figure the media out, you know?
I looked at that post regularly for 2 or 3 days. This was like, holy smokes, like ticking up. I was like, oh, within 3 hours it had 3,000 impressions. And like, I'm now remembering these things, right? Because my dopamine was triggered. I was watching it. I was cued in because I wanted to know what was going to happen. And it got all these comments and all these likes. And I was like, holy smokes, it can hit everyone. All these things are designed to create that dopamine spike. It's not even, I mean, it is the like, what do they call them? I think dark patterns. Like, it is the manipulative uses of UI and UX, but it is also just comments and likes. Comments and likes are still a thing that bring attention to this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, so in a classic high-tech model answer on this, our answer is not necessarily. You know, like we're not giving a yes, we're not giving it a no. I think the people I respect in the technology conversations are the ones who take more leveled responses to how we use technology, and I don't think all technology is just neutral. I think it can lean towards certain ways. Like, I think tech has a way of pushing certain types of patterns in our lives, but I don't think its existence necessitates that certain skills will be necessarily lost in generations.
Yeah.
And now, for sure, some will be. You know, like we talk about in our circle of work all the time, like this context of like, you know, when central heat became a thing, you like lost the thing of families sitting around a fire stove, you know, in the evening, and that changed family culture a little bit. It changed dynamics, but that doesn't mean like, you know, the world's falling apart. Like, there's ways to gain that element back of what you do, and people
it changed architecture.
Yeah,
like people might look immediately at the family and family structure, and that's fine. But like, then it changes architecture because you can have big houses with rooms also separately apart. Like, in my house growing up, I shared a wall with my parents' bedroom, and I was beneath directly my brother. Like, we had that immediate proximity. So my walls were just a small barrier between me and another family member, another room. But it was a small house from the 1930s. We eventually redid it, and inevitably all the rooms got moved away and opened up and pushed from each other. Like, the architecture's changed, but we didn't need to be near each other anymore. Like, you don't need the fireplace, the central, irons. Like, yeah, we've got the family impact, but now our houses can be bigger, and they push people away from each other functionally. But they also provide more privacy, space to have an office where you can do recordings for podcasting. Like, there's a lot of things that it impacts, and it's really amazing to think of the good and quote unquote the bad that comes with all technological advancements.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's our hot take. You know, it's less of a hot take and more of like a slow burn take that lasted 30 or so minutes.
Slow burn take. We should really try to advertise that as a game.
Yeah, slow burn take. We'll make sure to share this episode. A few people who listen to the podcast were at that game, so if you're listening, this is what Will and I wanted to say, but we didn't have time. So there's the vibe. With that, though,
see you next New Year's.
With that, it's time for the app.
Wow, you weren't slacking off with that one, were you?
That felt so much fun. That was really, that was great. The listeners may not like this, but I enjoy it. You know? Yeah.
It's fine next week. Next week I'll be hosting the call, folks. I won't be doing it.
Yeah, it's fine. My power just immediately got revoked. Like, Will's sitting here going, this is the last time I let
last
Josh
time you're the
control
host.
the recording. Will kind of threw in the little transition there, slacking off. We thought it would be, the reason we wanted to talk about the app Slack, specifically for education, is because it's cool. We wanted to talk about it for a little while, but also we thought it'd be funny while talking about social media impacting the younger generation to pick an app that involves social digital interaction. So we've already done Twitter for education. So we figured, twice. So figured we'd talk about Slack for education. Cause that is a thing. Yeah. Slack is mainly popular. If you don't know what Slack is a very popular, I think one of the industry standards, like business, chat tools, like file management, chat. I mean, that's
right.
That's really kind of a lot of what
like
we do
if
calls,
Microsoft Teams was Dr. Pips, Slack would be Coca-Cola. Like, that kind of makes the
you just put Teams in its place, which is if we haven't really hidden our opinions in this podcast about Teams and OneNote. So and I think
it's a little better than OneNote.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson though. When Microsoft creates an app with a purple themed icon, we're gonna hate it.
Abort.
Yeah.
Take off. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. So Slack, we've both used it for a while. Will and I had there was a little when Will worked in my office that I work in now, there was a Slack chat that they had with a few people that was kind of fun. I got invited into, and then it just it died real fast.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us just stopped having time to do Slack.
Your team changed tools, so your team wasn't talking in it
anymore.
anymore.
And so we talk there. It just became less. It kind of felt like we created a separate club, and I think we kind of killed it on purpose to kind of get that vibe. But you guys use Slack at your place.
I use it for work. Yeah, I use it for Pedagogy, a professional group of learning instructional designers I'm a part of. I use it for my local co-working factory. I think I'm in 4 or 5 different Slack channels. Yeah. I've been using it for a very long time too. I mean, most of my professional career at this point. I would say we probably adopted it at your team, the original team, in 2014, 2015.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's 8 or 9 years I've been using it. Fantastic tool. It's only gotten better. But one of the things I'd say is, to be fair, right, this is comparable as a discussion, as a tool. It's comparable to the episode we did about Discord.
Yes.
These tools, Discord and Slack, both are organized around channels or servers. Within channels or servers, you can do different groupings. You can do different smaller channels. You can do DMs and group threads, or you can just do one-on-ones, whatever you want to do. Slack, just like Discord, has integrated a video chat tool, so you can do quick huddle calls or phone calls through Slack directly. You don't have to have a third-party tool. Slack is just this end-all, be-all for social engagement, communication, interpersonal digital skills. But all of that, couching all that, I used it for my master's degree. Several of the courses, the teachers used it, and it wasn't allowed to be required at that time, but some of them, just said hey, this is how we're going to communicate. If you don't want to get the communications, don't come here, right? That was their response to it not being allowed to be required. But the one course I was in, literally we had an all class channel, and then we had group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5 channels, and then there's DMs. And so on a weekly basis, we had things we were supposed to do in the all-class channel. The professor had a specific channel to announce just his bulletin. You could reply and ask questions, but it was meant for him to post his stuff to the class for the week, which was great because he would post a bulletin announcement and somebody would be like, hey, I don't understand your requirement for post 3, and if he got that answer in real time, everybody could see his answer on the Slack thread. It was transparent communication for the whole class, and you didn't get 60,000 emails. I loved it. But then you were supposed to work with each of your groups and each of the group threads, but then you could go over and look at what the other groups are doing, but you could talk to the other groups about their stuff. It was a pretty organic and like I say, transparent learning community that way. You know, it was set up so that all the learners, while they had spaces to do specific things, all the learners could see and interact with each other across groups, because that was a part of that specific activity. You were supposed to be doing most of the work with your group, but then you had to like do one question or answer to somebody else in another group each week. Yeah. So just like a very basic like learning activity there for how someone's used Slack, but it's all instant messaging, all typing, GIFs, emojis, you know, pictures, file uploads. Like, it supports everything you'd need to have those digital communications that we're so more and more used to every day, I think, in this virtual career, virtual world that we have.
And in case anybody was curious, like Will said, it's similar to an app we've talked about before, Discord. I think it's interesting with Discord and Slack. They both have their primary places they came out of, which are Slack, mainly business. I mean, that's really where Slack kind of fostered out of, and Discord out of gaming. And we've talked about both have, interestingly, though, created education plans. They've ended up being used in education. Discord used one, and actually Slack has a Slack for education plan. You have to qualify for it, but in case you're curious, I didn't realize this, 85% off the Pro and Business Plus plans. So, like, for instance, Slack can be used for free, but you don't get, like, administrative ability to control everything. So, like, if you're just an instructor who has one course that you're doing things for, Slack free is probably fine.
Well, it only lets you save, like, 5,000 messages, too. So if you need to do... Or, like, it's some limit like that. Like, if you need to do any sort of research, or if you're going to have them doing a lot of messaging, and it's going to be all semester long or all year long in a K-12 context, 5,000 messages might not be enough if you need the history. But if it's just for communication, just for social engagement, it's not going to be graded necessarily, or you need to keep archives of it. Perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. So anyway, they've got education plans, and like Will said, I think like what I'm really looking for in a tool like this is ways to create separate channels. Do they have video and text chat? Like, really what this is trying to do, the reason Will and I talked about Discord, which anybody was curious, it's episode 7. That's how long it's been since we talked about Discord.
Wow.
So Will and I talked about Discord in episode 7 from season 1, where we talked about third spaces. And that's what Will's describing here. It's this concept of having a third space. You have your... I think I'm explaining this right. I keep saying it and then I never really carefully think about it. You have your first space of being in classroom a lot of times, or your area. You've got your LMS where you're doing stuff in, and then there's this concept of a third kind of collaborative space. Now, obviously, in online education, that looks a little bit different, but the concept is creating this space for collaboration that's less like organized assignments and announcements and discussions, but it's kind of free-flowing chat. That you can create for stuff and share, and can foster collaboration without having to all be on the same Zoom call or something, you know? So Slack is a great tool for that. You can create different channels. You can create a hub for your people to come into. If you use the education plan and you actually get it for your institution, you can create different integrations that actually work with some LMSs. I'm pretty sure Canvas actually has some kind of Slack integration, if I remember correctly.
That's cool.
So it's just a cool feature. It's a cool tool. I really like it. Like Will said, we use something different, but there's a lot of things I like about Slack better than our chat tool that we use. We use our chat tool because it's also a project management tool.
Right.
Slack
it's integrated
is
for you.
Not quite that. But there's a lot of cool stuff for Slack. So yeah, if you're looking for something to create that space for collaboration with your students, check it out. You can check out our webpage. I will link to the education plan information and stuff like that. But if you're new to this stuff and you want to play around with it, just download Slack for free and mess around with it. You can kind of get a vibe for how it works. Try it out with a class. There's definitely a lot you can do with a tool like Slack. So
it's fantastic. And one of the things that I think that I like about Slack, about Discord, I might have mentioned this even way back in episode 7, but like social media as a communication tool can be just as organic, can be just as social, can be just as, you know, water coolery, third spacey, but social media doesn't necessarily have privacy or security tools that can be safer for learning contexts. And so Slack is a closed environment. You can have a social media feel or experience, but there's no outsiders. You can keep everybody out that you don't need in there. So your students are safe to have the privacy and security needed to try things and fail and not maybe speak perfectly or have spelling errors, right? Like there's just so much less risk or social anxiety for students who are in that tool and learning in that space. I just think pros on pros on pros.
Yeah, and they have for me, the key is they have like app mentioning tools and stuff like that where you can app mention specific people. It helps with conversation digitally when you're trying to do stuff like that. I will say, just a quick note, as I was kind of re-going over our notes here on Slack, we are a higher education focused podcast a little bit, so this is fine. But if you are in K-12, just so you know, Slack does not allow anybody under the age of 16 to use their tool. So I didn't know that. They have restrictions on age. So that won't necessarily work for you in the K-12. I think there's probably some leniency for how you can figure some stuff out, but I think Slack is a little careful. I will say they are trying to be FERPA compliant for higher ed, but because they do have security and stuff set up on those chat messages, so it's not like some area that can easily be broken into or something like that. Slack is an industry standard tool. So, but I just want to mention that they kind of have a restriction on age limits for you. So. Anyway, that's Slack. Yeah. Check it out.
Just get in there, start slacking off.
Nobody's ever said that joke before. See, I helped. I realized as you said the joke, I was like, oh, he's probably trying to trigger a sound effect, you know? Or maybe did you want that? Is that what you... Do you want that?
That would have been more succinct.
That would have been more succinct? Okay. Yeah, we're still figuring this out, okay? Sounds difficult. Anyway, with that said, just a next episode. What's coming up next on the High Tech Podcast? That is a great question because I clicked out of my notes. I don't
think we linked the episodes either.
We didn't do things. So just
next episode is an interview with Brain Racers.
Oh, look at that.
Talk to GK. Episode 97.
Oh man, thank you for the save. My number lock was also off, so my number pad wasn't working. I couldn't type in the episode. Look at us. Yes, next episode, I got you back. Episode 97. Okay, Brain Racers interview. Brain Racers is cool. It's you will definitely want to check out this episode. It was an app that Will and I'm just gonna be honest, we had no idea what it was until was it GK reached out to us about coming on the podcast or something? I don't remember the full context.
Don't remember.
Anyway, stuff happened. We met GK, who is now our buddy, and I think he should be a third member of the High Tech Podcast. He fits well. But Brain Racers is an education-based game app that GK started, and he comes on and talks a lot about it. It's a great episode. You're going to want to check this out because GK does everything from talks about the app to starts to get into neuroscience. He does all the stuff. Luckily, Will and I have already recorded this episode, so we know what you're in for next week. So check that out, episode 97. Again, just a reminder, you can find us on Twitter and YouTube at High Tech Podcast. Subscribe. Go find our YouTube account. Give it a little. I think it's a bell, right? I feel like I watch enough videos. Click the bell. Right, that's a thing. When we get more professional, we'll probably figure out some way to, put stuff.
There's
in
a subscribe button. There's a bell. Give it a thumbs up. These are all good things for the algorithm.
If you like the podcast, that would be super helpful. If you don't like us, just leave us alone. Don't private message Will at inbox@hightechpod.us. You can email
and frankly,
us there.
You do that, and I'm going to have a conversation with you, and we're going to figure out why you don't like us, and then we're going to have you on the podcast and have a conversation about it. It'll
be great. It'll be another Hot Takes episode. I'm sure.
Love it.
Nailed it. Anyway, in our website, check us out, hightechpod.us. You can check out all the episode pages that we create, including this one, because we will have links to stuff about Slack. So if you're interested in using it, you'll want to check that out. So again, thank you for joining us another week as we continue to learn what it looks like to harness technology in good ways. It's not always bad. In the classroom, whether online or in person or other places. I don't know. I got nothing. See ya.
See ya.